really excited to have Erick on. Erick is a part of arguably one of the most successful real estate companies in San Diego. GG Homes and Honest Agent Team. Honest Agent Team is, how many deals did Honest Agent Team do last year?
We did north of 375 deals last year.
375. And what to me is even more impressive than that, Erick, is most of these deals are properties that you guys actually end up buying through GG Homes and then rehab, put them back on the market through the Honest Agent Team. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. About 85% to 90% are our own projects.
So why this is impressive is so many agents, even investors, but in the context of today's call with the people that are watching, so many agents are having a challenge taking listings right now, right? We have a major shortage of inventory, but we can all agree that it's even harder to buy a property at a discount, because as an investor, that's clearly what you have to do, right? It's even harder to buy a property at discount than it is to get a listing at retail. So not only are you guys able to get properties and create inventory, more often than not, I'm assuming that you're buying these things at a little bit of a discount or a big discount compared to what they can get selling it, publicly and on the MLS. Is that correct?
It is. People that sell homes to us typically have some type of issue with the home itself or a situation. And by creating value in other forms other than just simply price, that's how we're able to get into these discounts, right? The traditional listing process is a fantastic process. However, it does take more time, right? And so for us, we can come in much faster. We can deal with a lot of the issues that people have and create a massive sense of convenience. And that's why we are able to pick up these types of discounts, reposition these properties, create a value add, and run a business off of it. So it's getting away a little bit from the traditional sense of everyone cares just about how much the home sells for, to what problems can we solve and what convenience can we build for that specific seller. And it doesn't fit every box, right? There's only a percentage of sellers that are fitting this box. But for them, it's a great process. It makes it super easy and convenient. They get what they want, and we get a great project.
I love it. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but to me, seems like it's fair to argue that strategies that you guys are using in terms of getting very specific and targeted to who you're approaching, it carries over to getting listings as well. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You could target a lot of the same stuff that we target and get plenty of listings. You could also partner with investors like us that could offer cash directly to these sellers, and you can earn commissions off of them. There's a lot of agents that operate in this exact space and build an entire business off of it. And why we really like it right now, which is so interesting, is I know volumes have gone down, right? If you look at sales volume across the county, we've been going down year after year. People don't want to sell. Rates were low, now high. And so there's less incentive for your everyday seller to sell. But the people that are selling now, who are they? They're people that really kind of have to sell, or there's some type of life event where, it makes a lot of sense to sell. And that's what you're left with. And so even though the market's gone down in volume, we've actually increased in volume. And the reason for that is our targeting is very specific to people that do have this need. And so if you position the type of sellers that you are targeting, we're not talking move up sellers right now. You're not looking at someone that lives in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. They're moving up to a 5-3 because they're having a bunch of kids. A lot of times that seller is staying in place, right? They might be adding, they might be converting their garage for some extra bedrooms, or they're just cramming in there, right? Why? They have a 3% mortgage rate right. And it's a little bit higher today, and that should balance out. However, there are people that, are going through a life event. They have a home that has become a burden to them, not an asset, and they need to sell, right? They can take that cash out, they can move it somewhere else, or they can bank it and use it for the rest of whatever life brings them. So by changing what you target, there is volume there. There is plenty of volume. In fact, it doesn't go down. The volume stays pretty steady. It's not dependent on this rate environment. So that's, I think, why we've been able to increase volumes despite the market going down significantly in total transaction count.
I love that. Just some data to kind of put things in perspective. I think last year in 2022, 2021 was the peak of the most homes ever sold in America. I want to say it was just over 6 million transactions were made. This year, NAR is projecting that we're going to do about 4 to 4.5 million. So although there's a 2 million deficit, 4.5 million is still a very normal market, right? Like that's, if you compare it to the peak of all peaks, that's whatever it is, 30% less. But the reality is, if you go back to 2000, let's say 12, 13, 14, all those years, like great markets were markets that you were doing 4 or 5 million transactions in a year. And I think what's important here is, Erick, you just said, the people that are sitting on the sidelines more often than not right now are the people that don't absolutely need to sell, right? They're going to cram people into their homes. They're going to make it work because they're at a 3% versus getting a 6.5 or whatever it is today. But with all that said, there's still going to be 4.5 million transactions that happen. And what's always impressed me about you guys is, I remember talking to Phil at this point, I don't know, a few years ago, and he said, we've gotten our targeting and our approach down so well that when we talk to a seller, to them, we know that they're already talking about selling. We know that they're already in the thought process, and we show up, it's almost like a sign. It's almost like, man, these are our people. And to me, in business, there's strategy and there's techniques, right? A technician will say, well, if I want to do more transactions, I'm going to make more calls. I'm going to do more marketing. A strategist says, well, how can I get in front of better people? How can I increase conversions? I think what you guys do really well and what sets you apart from most people is you've blended strategy and tactics, right? You have a very strong sales approach. You guys know how to communicate effectively, make people feel comfortable and confident. But you're also showing up to the right people at the right time with the right message, which falls into the strategy section. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a increase in volume that's required as you scale business, of course. More on the technician side. What you target though might be more of a strategy, and you can increase your time. I mean, everything's expected value, right? And so if my expected value working in a specific niche, for example, I'm going to get, let's call it a 10x return on what my normal baseline would be versus another niche or just open market, right? I'm going to take my resources and go try to make 10x on my time versus doing the baseline, of course, right? And so as you get more and more deep into this game, you'll realize where those areas are where you can really invest your time, where you get these higher returns on your time and your marketing dollars too.
100%. So let's dive into that. I know that you have a few strategies you wanted to share with us today. Why don't we uncover one strategy? If an agent was to ask you, or brand new or an experienced agent, where would you focus your time in terms of the data or the type of people you're going after? Let's talk about who they are, how you find them, and then get into some of the marketing and approach side of things, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, I'll share a little story about how I got started. I'm going to be a little bit biased on what I'm going to recommend, but what I'll say is there are different types of niches out there that are going to fit your personality type. Some are not going to make sense and some will. And so I'll give you my story and how I went through it. I think agents that are listening to this call, if they pursue a similar route, they can have tons of success. With that said, if it's not a good fit for you, there are so many other places. Go find that place for yourself, right? You can do it in so many different ways. Everything works if you work it, right? What I did when I got started, I came over from the hard money space. I was doing investment purpose lending. So I had an idea of groups that were doing investment fix and flip, some buy and hold, some small infill stuff, because I was doing loans on it. And that was my background. Coming over the real estate side, it was all brand new to me. I didn't know what to prospect. I didn't know who to prospect. I didn't know what I needed to say. It was all brand new. And what I got started with was going after notice of defaults. For whatever reason, that was the one piece of data that we had in the office when I first started with GG about 6-7 years ago. And our whole goal there was not actually to get listings or to buy homes for cash. All we wanted to do was figure out what people's problems were and see if we could help them. That was it.
Mark.
We weren't in the selling business per se. These are people that, unfortunately are in a tougher spot. They're behind on payments. The bank is now trying to recoup their debt obligation. And they actually have a lot of options. And so it moved into this solution selling. For me, that solution selling aspect of it was right up my alley. I was like, hey, look, I can walk through all these different types of options, provide value to these sellers. And I know a percentage of them are going to want to sell. Why? Because it's probably the best thing for them to do. They're just a little bit overextended. This home is no longer an asset to them. It's become a major liability. It's affecting other things outside of just the home that they're in, personal life, credit scores, all these different things that it's affecting. If we can solve this problem, in this case via sale, well, guess what? We'll get the business. We'll also be able to help them transition. And so I realized it was so much less about actually selling the home. It was more so about being an ear for them, being a shoulder to cry on. It was someone to help them with their transition in life. It was someone to battle back against the banks that were doing some unscrupulous stuff at the time. They still are in some degrees, right? And so I just focused on helping people that were in that kind of place in life. It happens. It's crazy. It could happen to anybody. And by helping, it turned into business. We were helping way more people than we were actually selling homes for, which I'm proud about. But it turned into plenty of sales. And so that's how I started. And the means and the methods of how I got there was I'd pick up the phone, I was calling. I was grabbing a hold of this data. You can find it through, companies like Property Radar as an example. You get it through the county recorder website. There's different ways that you can get this information. I was picking up the phone, I was calling. I was also going out and knocking doors. That was what we were doing. I had no marketing dollars behind me. I was just simply going after and targeting these people. And I think that's where a lot of people get hung up as agents. Is it requires a lot of grit and resilience and consistency, especially in the beginning. Like when you're new in this business, you don't really know what you're saying 100% of the time. I mean, that would be impossible, right? You're learning as you earn, right?
That's right.
And you have to stay in that mindset. You don't need all the answers. In fact, sometimes a person with less answers is going to do better than the person with all the answers because they overwhelm the prospect. So like if you're new,
True.
it could be an advantage. Just understand that, believe that, know it at your core that you can bring a ton of value without knowing much. But the point is you have to go out there and take the action. You have to go out and pick up the phones day in and day out. I mean, I was religious about this. I would every morning I'd be calling 8 a.m. And I didn't have to call all day either. I'm just calling 8 a.m. I was making my best prospects. Anyone I couldn't get a hold of, I'd get in the car, I'd drive out there, I'd knock some doors. And what happened was the first couple months I was getting blown up out of the water. I mean, I just had no shot. I didn't have a chance with some of them. But there was a couple that I'd have these conversations with that I'm like, whoa, I can see how this could turn into business. I can see how this could turn into a client. And that's all the belief that I needed at the time to say, all right, let me pursue this. I know it's frustrating. I know I'm getting beat up a bit here. Let me see what I can do to change on a little bit of what I'm saying. And let's help some more people and get some deals through. And that's what happened. Within a few months, then we started getting some people that said, hey, you know what? All these other options are great, but you're right. I need to get out of this thing. This thing is no longer an asset to me. This is a liability. I need to get out from under this thing. Let me start over fresh, whether that be, downsizing, whether that be just renting for a bit, moving out of state, all the different things that you see people do once they sell. And that's where I started. And I started in one specific niche. And that's all I did all day. It's all I did.
I love it. There's so much there to unpack. First thing is, you talk in this example, you were going after NODs, notice of defaults. That is a very specific category, but it falls under the overarching category of life event, right? We don't know why they're in notice of default. It could have been strategic at the point. They were just facing a hard time. Like there's so many reasons, but there's something happening, right? And today, there's still NODs, but in any market, there's always something happening to a certain percentage of people be it divorce, bankruptcy, death, whatever it may be. So I love that you started with NODs and that clearly worked for you. The other thing that I really want to shine light on, because I think this isn't talked about enough and probably went over some people's head, is you weren't afraid to go out and practice on real life people until you learned what to say, right? And you said after getting kicked around for a couple of months, there was a couple conversations, you're like, whoa, I can see how this will result in something. And I say that because for anyone that's listening, remember that it's not supposed to be easy, right? We've all heard that any motivational seminar you go to, like, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So we know it's not supposed to be easy. And we get paid the money that we get paid, remember this, for having the difficult conversations, right? The reason you get paid what you get paid is to have the difficult conversations. So if we know that it's not easy and we need to have difficult conversations, we also know that we're not going to know what to say out the chute, but over the course of time, we'll start to find patterns, common objections, etc. Why do we get hung up on practicing on real life people? I'm a big believer in role play. We should role play. I'm assuming your team probably role plays.
That's right.
But there's also something to be said about just getting in the streets, either by phone call or door knocking or whatever it is, or a combination of both, and practicing on real life people. And the other thing that I want to touch on, and I'm curious how you found this mindset or if it was just natural for you, you always came from a place of service. And I have found in my life that the people that have achieved the most amount of success almost always say, dude, I just wanted to do what was right for people. I want a problem. I wanted to serve. I wanted to come from a place of giving and serving and helping, and that made everything else work. Now, a lot of people are just chasing the dollar, and that's fine. We're all chasing dollars. And they say, yeah, I want to help people, but that's probably third or fourth on the list, right? Talk to me a little bit about like how you got yourself into that mindset. Was it trained? Was it natural? And how did that keep you going when you were getting your ass kicked?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think some of it's came from before, just how I saw the world growing up. I think a lot of people can also agree with that. There's a part of you that just wants to do right and help others. It's actually rewarding, right? You get a dopamine hit when you help others. It's part of nature, right? It's hardwired into us. I think all of us have that. But I realized it was also a more successful strategy. I can give you an example. When I was also early on, there was one time I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try something a little bit different on this appointment. I'm gonna try to go directly for purchasing this house. I'm not gonna go the help route. I'm not gonna go this other route. I'm gonna see if we can just purchase this house directly. And at times that could work, but I went in there and I got blown up. I got absolutely blown up in this appointment. And the reason for that, it was too much about me and not about them. The more that you can help others achieve what they want, the more they're going to like, trust, and do business with you. And if you have a compelling story, if you have a compelling value proposition, you still get the business by helping people. And it's a matter of understanding what those needs are. And then if your solution happens to work great, then do it. And if it doesn't, your solution doesn't, go refer it to another person that can help them with their problem. Because guess what? What I also found out, all the people that I was referring out to call attorneys that were doing bankruptcy or, what have you, probate attorney, whatever, that business always came back to me. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. In fact, it came back in magnitudes because the people that did come back would refer business, right? And so just by leading with, hey, what is this person's problems? What are their needs? How can I help solve those? And I also have these other solutions that help benefit me directly. If those happen to line up, great. If not, let's point them in the right direction. There's so much business out there. We're gonna land on plenty of people that need what I have to offer right now.
Dude, I love that. You said something that is, to me, one of the fundamentals of selling, but it's also the fundamentals of just being a good business person and a good operator. You said, I would go in and make it all about me, but I needed to make it all about them. I've said this for years, that when you are working in any sort of sales environment, your job is to meet the client where they're at. as opposed to getting them or trying to get them to meet you where you're at. And that really comes in the form of asking a lot of questions, right? It comes in the form of stepping out of your commission agenda for a moment, right? And know that there's this compounding effect that is very unquantifiable. You can't quantify that. If I just forget about the commission and step into meeting the client where they're at and step into being a solution that over the course of time, yes, I'm going to get my ass kicked, but when I start referring to attorneys, not only might I get that referral back, but I'll probably also get their other referrals that are coming without an agent. And it's so important when we are in the sales process that we remember we have to meet the client where they're at. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
So,
I'll expand upon that real quick.
Okay.
Because I think it's so important in selling, is it's meeting them out also on a needs perspective, but it's also meeting them where they're at emotionally, how they process information. For example, if you go into a presentation and you're talking to a seller and all of a sudden you start busting out charts and graphs and all this different stuff that's very data forward, and this seller, they don't like data. It gives them anxiety. It makes them quiver. It makes them uncomfortable. They don't understand it fully. What's going to happen is you're going to push them away. You got to meet people at where they're at and how they like to receive information. You need to meet them at where they're at emotionally. Like sometimes I've walked into appointments where I can tell someone's in a really bad spot emotionally. Something had happened, and I'll walk into appointments. I've gone into appointments where I said, "Hey, thanks for being here. My tone's really low," and they're very upset, and I'll go silent with them and just sit there and feel for 5 minutes, 10 minutes on end before they're ready to talk. I mean, you don't see a lot of textbooks talking about that in sales, that's what you should be doing your first 5-10 minutes of the appointment. But guess what? That turned into business. Why? Because I understood them where they're at. And so I think the more you can meet people where they're at, not just on a business context and what solution you have to offer, but emotionally, how they like to communicate, the level of understanding, the more you get down to their level, make them feel very comfortable. And then you can start to increase your level of expertise or what have you after the fact. But you got to meet them there. It's so, so, so important.
That's the versatility component, right? When you can be versatile enough to, when you come in and someone's going through something, you could tell that they're not in a good emotional state, and you're coming in all energetic and charts and graphs and all these things, like that's like oil and water, right? And when you can match their tonality, match their energy, all of a sudden they start to feel a little more comfortable. It's not a magic wand. It's not going to immediately get them to open up, but people like to work with people that they feel are like them and feel understand them and feel that have their best interest at heart. And what you're doing there, I mean, they teach this in really advanced sales classes, right? It's a component of NLP, right? It's the neuro-linguistic side of, if someone is very low on emotion and I come in firing hot, it's really hard for them to connect. But when you go deeper to them as a person and what they're going through, not only are you doing good for people, but you're also making it easier on yourself. And that's the big component there. I love that. So talk to me about today. So how much of your guys' outreach is NODs versus other life events, and then we'll kind of break those down.
Yeah, what's so interesting, where you start isn't where you're going to end up oftentimes, right? And so we do almost very little relative percentage-wise. If you look at our revenues from defaults, it might be less than 5% now, right? So that was simply a niche that we started in. It's a great niche. We still do it and help plenty of people, but we've expanded beyond that. What happened was, eventually, like defaults when I got started kept going down and down and down. There's just less and less distress on the default side. So I was like, hey, where else can we go find people that have a need to, figure out some type of life event or potentially sell the house? Like, where is the motivation at? So moving from there, we moved into tax liens. Tax liens are often the first thing that happened to someone as they get into financial distress. The last thing people tend to pay our taxes because the ramifications are a little bit more drawn out. It doesn't necessarily hit credit right away. There's all of the things that, people make their car payment before they pay their taxes, right? And so Tax liens were another niche that we started to move into, and there's a lot more of them. If you look at the county right now, there are over 10,000 of them. There are
10,000.
over 10,000 of them. If you go up north and in your LA counties, you know, if you combine those all together, there's over 85,000. So there are, I mean, that's too many people. That's too much outreach that you have time for. I mean, think about that. You have a niche that turns over plenty of sales, and there's too many of them for you to go talk to. That's a great place to be. So that was like the next niche that I kind of rolled into. That was had a little bit more volume. The need was at times a little bit lessened. However, I also realized this type of person that had a tax lien was also a little bit different than someone that was in default. It required different strategies. Oftentimes you had people that were very objective about it. Like, hey, I can't afford this. I need to sell now. It's a great niche to roll into. So it started there. We started realizing other things. People that were in default that got out of them still want to sell. What do you know? All these clients that I'd helped, they come back and they're hitting me up saying, hey, I actually want to sell now. Thank you so much for helping us. Okay, well, maybe I should target other people in that same exact spot. So I started doing that. Naturally, people that are in default, some of them come from divorces, right? So, okay, we started learning about the divorce niche. People going through probate, you know, oftentimes properties are in default, but it's also dual tracking a probate, and the probate's stopping it from being sold at the time. But those deals end up selling a lot of the time. People inherit these homes, they go through probate process, it's way behind on payments and taxes, and they're going to sell that house and take their equity out more times than not. So that became a great niche. People that pass away, you know, oftentimes people can't afford payments because one of the spouses or a single owner, they passed away and there's no one making that payment anymore, right? So it started our understanding of all these other niche. I know I just listed those other, I guess, 5 right there. But what we started to do is, okay, we have this one, let's start rolling into these others and let's start figuring out what are their needs, how do we help them, and then let's drum up some new business. So that's exactly what we did.
Man, I love that. And again, I don't want to beat a drum here or a dead horse, whatever they call it. I don't know if it's PC to say that anymore. All difficult conversations, Eric. All difficult conversations, right? Someone has a tax lien, difficult convo. Someone that going through divorce, difficult convo. Probate, difficult convo. You know, all of these things are difficult conversations. But guess what? Those people, they need help, right? So the conversation might be hard in the initial outreach. It might be hard to penetrate, you know, to the point in which they're actually communicating with you. But these people are, to a degree, confused, lost, don't know where to go. And I always use this analogy, knock on wood. I'm in real estate, right? And knowing everything I know, if I was dealing with a loss of a parent and the probate real estate part of, you know, the disposition of that asset, I myself, with everything that I know, I'd be in a tough place. I would be emotionally wrecked. I would be, you know, trying to avoid the uncomfortable part of selling, you know, mom's house or whatever it is. So imagine like these people that don't have the connections, don't have the understanding, don't have the education, when you can come in and kind of be their support system by answering unanswered questions, by giving them resources, you effectively are taking them off the market. Because when Erick shows up and is a giver and a supporter, and isn't just going straight for contract, what happens with that prospective seller is they're like, dude, Erick's a good guy. He's helped me out a lot. And now that I'm really, you know, ready to make the decision, that's naturally the person I'm going to talk to. So chat, I know you probably have questions. If you're in one of the watch rooms, go ahead and have the moderator text me, or you can throw it in the Q&A. I want to make sure we answer any questions that you have. So Erick, let's talk a little bit about outreach on any one of these, you know, these data points. I'm assuming today it's a lot more marketing in the front than when you first got started. So let's talk about when, assuming that there's not a ton of marketing budget, and I'm going after one of these data points. Obviously, we're starting with a phone call or a door knock. Let's talk a little bit about that outreach if we can.
Yeah. So if you're on a shoestring budget, it's actually a really great place to be because you can still generate so much so much business if you kind of know what to go after and you stay consistent, you just go after, you'll learn along the way. And what I would do if I was brand new and I was on a lower budget, I'd go talk to a title rep, or perhaps pick up a license or membership to a website, something like a Property Radar or a Black Knight or a PropStream, something that aggregates data. And what I would do, let's say you talk to a title rep saying, hey, look, I'm looking to target, let's call it tax liens in San Diego County. Go ask the title rep for that information. Skip trace it, scrub it for DNC, and start making some outreach. And that outreach could be whatever you make it, to be honest. It could be leading with, go ahead.
Am I going straight to, hey, I know that you got a tax lien? Are we going straight in that conversation? Or I know you're going through divorce, or I know there's a death in the family. At what point in that call do we uncover the fact that we know this piece of data exists?
Yeah, great question. I think it depends on the niche and also your style. So if someone has a default, I'm going to make it known out of the gates that, hey, I'm giving you a call because there was a default filed. I'm here to provide some solutions. Tax liens, not so much. I might bring it up later in the call. There's enough volume where I can just, hey, I'm working with a buyer client of mine, or they're looking to purchase a property. Any thoughts of selling anytime in the near future? Or as simple as, hey, you wouldn't be interested in selling this house, would you? I had a buyer that was interested. It's that simple. And what'll happen is a lot of them will say, no, not interested. And some will be like, yeah, maybe in the future. And some will say, yeah, actually, I am thinking about selling right now. Well, that's a great entryway. So you obviously take those layups. The people that are kind of hesitating are like, yeah, no, not, whatever. Just hit them with another follow-up question saying, hey, do you think that could change in the next 6 to 12 months? I'd love to, follow up with you when the time's a little bit better. That success rate on that tax liens list, I mean, we're seeing it at 7 to 10%.
So actually a question came in about that, so it's probably a good time to ask. Regarding tax liens, can you recall a scenario or give an example of how you've helped someone with this previously, specifically times when you provided a solution that did not immediately result in a listing or a sell, but led them to come back to you later when they were ready to make a decision?
Yeah, great question. So here's an example. There was a homeowner. They had a property in Serra Mesa, and they also had a rental in Spring Valley. And both properties had a tax lien. They were behind tax on both properties. And the reason this happened was the tenant that they had in Spring Valley was not paying rent. Okay, so they were not receiving payments. They were a little bit behind. They're making their mortgage payments, but they weren't making their tax payments. And so my conversation was, hey, what's the most important thing here? Do we want to eliminate this tax lien before it gets a little bit out of control with all the different fees and costs associated? Do we want to, just try to hang on until this tenant turns around? Do we want to go through an eviction process? What do we want to do? And so ultimately what happened was got him set up with an eviction attorney, started moving that route. The tenant wasn't budging. I went out there and talked to the tenant. I was like, look, man, I understand that you're in a spot too. I feel you. It's tough out here to make by. I'm having a tough time getting by. I'm just relating with the tenant saying, however, if we don't get up to speed on these payments, they're going to move forward with an eviction. And you and I both don't want that. The seller doesn't want that. They don't want to put you in a tougher spot. If you don't get this resolved, this is going to hit your credit. You're never going to rent again at anything B grade or A grade in San Diego County ever again. No one's going to look at a tenant with an eviction on the record. So there's a solution here. The solution here is I can help you find a place that makes a little bit more sense. If you have anywhere else that you're thinking of moving to, I'm also all ears to that. Long story short, the tenant ended up leaving, and the tenant moved out of state. The homeowner didn't collect their rent. However, they had a property now that they could start generating income off of. That income then helped them generate enough to start to get, back a little bit more on track with their tax payments. But they called me 3 months later and they said, you know what, it's just too much of a burden. I don't like being a landlord anyways. I didn't get into this as a business. I just had this other house and I want you to sell it for us. And so then we sold that house. We actually purchased that house that it needed a ton of work. And so for them, it was a was great because the stress of the tax lien went away. The stress of the tenant not paying went away. The tenant stress actually went away because the tenant was in a place where they weren't a bad person.
They were just going through what they were going through.
They were going through what they're going through. That's right. They moved out of state. They found some more affordable, got a new job, and it was ultimately a win for everyone. And so you're not sure where it's going to navigate. But that's just an example, and that happens all day, every day.
You know what's great about that, Eric, is that tenant, it's easy in one perspective, let's say as the agent or as the landlord, to say, oh, this freaking tenant, this. They're naturally, no one's excited for the most part to just not pay their bills. No one's like really pumped to know that at any moment they might get an eviction notice. Like that is weighing heavy on them. And sometimes they just put their head in the sand and I'm going to deal with it when I absolutely have to. So not only did you end up helping the seller, but dude, you helped the tenant, right? Like you were the person that showed up in their time of need. You were cool. You were, supportive, and you probably put them in a better position today, however many years later. I bet you they could look back and say, man, that really nice guy, Eric, that showed up really changed the trajectory of our lives and where we're headed. So I think that's a great example of you helped two people, right? And you ended up getting that property listed down the road. So I love that. Now let's assume that we have a little bit of marketing budget. And what I'm hearing more than anything is you guys are winning by going after live events. That's an obvious approach for anyone that wants to get very strategic with their outreach. If you were to start some marketing, what would be the first place that you start? Would you be doing mail pieces? Would you be creating custom audiences? Where would you put your extra couple $1,000s a month if you're going to target one of these data points?
Yeah. And again, what would work for our business may not be the fit for you. So I just want to put a disclaimer out there. If your business is really heavily built on buyers, for example, and you get a couple sellers they meet you at an open house and that's how they sell their house, think about what your core business is already before you just pick up and 180 it. Because oftentimes you could just put, gasoline on whatever fire you already have burning. And that might be the best way to build the biggest fire. Right. And so for us, in the route that we would, if I were to redo it and start from zero and start up a new marketing budget, what I would do then is probably send out very niche pieces of mail, almost handwritten. I'm talking really low budget here on properties that I know have a very high chance of turning over, or it's a product type that I really am interested in, that where we know we can monetize from an investment perspective, or I know that an investor would really want to buy. That's what I'd be in the business in. So let's say you're an agent, you're not an investor. Totally, that's a great place to start. Maybe you become an investor one day and you want to learn it. Great place to start. It's a very small batch. It could be handwritten. It could be typed up. It could be anything. I mean, we're talking
handwritten letters crush.
Handwritten letters, yeah. You see a property, you tell it needs a ton of work. Maybe you realize it also has some other distress points. You go over there and you make a compelling, just little mail piece and send it over to them, a door hanger, a note, leave it on the door. And we're talking very small budget here. You're not going to get a ton of responses, but you probably will get some responses. And that's where I would start to scale my marketing. I wouldn't bank on it becoming my whole book of business with a small budget. But what will happen is you'll start to pick up some deals from it. And you'll realize, oh my goodness, that marketing cost me about $3,000 to pick up this deal, or cost me $1,500 to pick up this deal. You'll figure out what that cost per contract becomes. And you'll realize, well, if I just invest a little bit more in a very similar type niche, or I find an even better type of niche to go after, well, I guess I can start getting more contracts at $1,500 per contract. And it can start off slow. It doesn't have to break the bank. You don't have to go drop $50,000 all at once. You're probably not ready for it, by the way. But that's just the tip of it, right? It's just is start with something, see how the results are, figure out what your cost per contract are. It'll be a small sample size to begin with. Maybe get lucky right away. Maybe it takes a little longer, but I'd start there. I think the other avenues are interesting. You mentioned a custom audience. We're talking, advertising on any Meta products, Instagram, Facebook. Those are interesting. I don't in some markets they work better than others. So if you're around the country, I think there's other markets that that type of targeting could work really well in a low budget. It doesn't in our market, from our experience, at least for our business model. It could be totally different for other business models and other niches or personas. Things like pay-per-click marketing are interesting, but the costs are so high. So I don't know if I would jump into that right away. It's
Right.
very difficult as an agent to turn a profit on that type of lead generation. We do TV. That's also something that's really tough. So I would probably start going with small batch
I saw
handwritten
the
letters.
commercial the other day, by the way.
Oh, did you? Nice.
Yeah. So I have a question about that we'll jump to in a moment, but I want to rewind real quick because this is really important. I've always said, and you saying it, like, once you know your cost per contract, let's say it's 1,500, let's say it's 3,000. Everything in your world becomes easier once you know that number.
That's right.
But you can't assume that your first $3,000 is going to make it happen.
Right.
It's an averaged cost per contract.
That's
you
right.
might spend 10,000 and get one, and then on your next 3,000, get two more, right? So it's not all campaigns are created equal in the sense that it's like a register. Every time I give it $1,500, it gives me a contract. But if you go into it knowing that I'm approaching the right people with the right message, the right cadence and consistency, over the course of time, you will find your price per contract, your acquisition cost. Once you know that, and I'm assuming this is what you guys do, Eric, once I know that every time I spend $2,200 on average, I get a contract. As an agent, my average commission check is, let's say, $13,000. So every 3,000 I spend, I'm making 10,000 of profit. At that point, is it fair to say that you start to pour some gasoline on that campaign?
That's right. That's right. And you do it in unison with your capacity.
Of course.
Right. So if you're a solo agent, you might only be able to take on X amount of leads per week and per month and per quarter. Because remember, these things compound. So you have to be able to manage that book of business. But yes, once you start to figure out a formula for it, it becomes a math equation. And you can increase the amount of marketing dollars you spend. You also increase your skill set so that your cost per contract goes down. The amount of deals that you sign goes up. And that's where it gets really fun. And you can start to create a very predictable business based on your marketing costs and your skill set.
I love it. So let's talk about working with an investor partner. If you're not an investor yet, doesn't matter what city and what country, I mean, any city in any county in this country, there's always going to be a GG Homes type, buyer that's always looking for more opportunity. I know that's a big part of your guys' business, and you're always looking to work with more agents. Let's just break this thing down. If I am an agent and I'm obviously looking for listings, but I know that I have an investor in my back pocket, am I leading that in my marketing campaigns? Am I saying, hey, I also have a motivated buyer, or is that something that I bring out after I'm mid-conversation with them? How do we leverage that investor component with our outreach and our marketing best?
Yeah, great question. I would say with new prospects, meaning we don't have a pre-existing relationship, leading with, hey, I have a buyer that can pay all cash in advance is one of the best things that you can do. Because people don't want you to list their home necessarily. They really don't. They're not like, oh, who could I have list my property and make a commission off me today? Yeah, exactly. That's not how that works. What they actually want is they want their problem solved. And if that problem they have is I want this house sold, and sometimes sold quickly or sold with challenges, or sold to a cash buyer, or last time I don't get burned by, falling out of escrow 3 times, that becomes very appealing. Yeah. Right. And so I will lead with that virtually always onto all niches where I don't have a pre-existing relationship. If I have a pre-existing relationship, I've done business with them before, it's a past client I'm remarketing, that conversation might be a little bit different. depending on what I know is going on in their life and with that property at the time, if there's a value add. And so I like it for initial outreach. It's engaging people. That's what sellers actually want. They don't want a listing agent. In fact, in our office, the word listing is banned. You don't say the word listing on a phone call, in person ever. It's when I'm in appointments, like, look, we can bring our retail buyers to this home. They wouldn't be paying cash. Their timelines would be a little bit longer. I can bring in all the other brokers and agents and drum up those buyers as well. And we can present these offers. Here's how the process works. We're going to put a sign in the front yard. Here's how we're going to advertise online. And we're going to bring all the retail buyers we can. I don't talk about the word listing at all.
I love that.
I'll insert a contract at the end, but I don't even use the word listing. So I like leading with cash is my point.
I've been saying that, for people that have an investor buyer, I'm walking into the appointment and I'm saying, look, I have an all cash buyer that can close at this price on your terms, in terms of time, et cetera, et cetera. Or I can go find you a retail buyer. Which one, obviously the conversation isn't this direct, but which one would you prefer? Would you like for me to bring Eric with all cash, I can close as slow or as fast as you want? Or would you like me to go find a retail buyer at a different price? The thing about this is people want options, and these are both good options that both result in you as an agent doing a transaction. Now, I'm assuming, Eric, that a lot of times, if me as an agent, I bring you a seller, I'm getting paid on more than just one side, right?
That is the beauty of it.
Yes.
So imagine for all the work that you do, you get paid double. So let's go back to the cost per contract example. Right? If your cost per contract was $3,000 and you were going to make $13,000 on a listing on average, whatever, right? Could be 25, could be 30. I mean, who knows, right? Imagine that for the same amount of marketing dollars and the same amount of initial work, just to get to the original contract, you could double that each time and then potentially triple it if there was enough margin in the deal. Well, now you have a much more lucrative business, in my opinion, because it requires.
And the tripling is on the relist after it's rehab.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
With most investors, if you can, and there's enough meat on the bone, they're going to want you to resell it. You're an expert in that neighborhood. You know how to sell. You went out and got and procured this project. You might have invested your own money, definitely at least your own time, right? Us as investors, we want nothing more than other agents that are out there hustling, making it happen, to be rewarded for that. And so, yeah, if there's enough margin deal, we'd love for that agent to relist it and, hey, bring the buyer, go make 4 ends on that same property. That happens all the time. You'd be shocked. It happens all the time because they know that property, they know that neighborhood intimately, especially if the inventory is constrained. That agent's going to know where offers are at. They all know the competing buyers that show up at the open houses. They're going to be able to convert some of those buyers and get a fourth side, right? And so,
talk about strategy, right? That's a good strategy,
right? Because then your cost per contract, you know what, you can afford to pay even more on marketing, and allows you to scale up more. And what's so interesting, I think it's a mistake, is I think a lot of agents get in this mode of the only thing the seller wants is me to put it up on the MLS and sell to a retail buyer. And that's actually not the case at all. So many sellers, they want ease and convenience. And oftentimes there's investment offers that are better than what a retail buyer could. A lot of times retail buyers can't even buy some of these homes because their loans don't qualify, right? So you got to think about all these different variables and how they can help a seller, but also benefit your own business. It really does.
I love that. So obviously, if an agent is in San Diego, they can reach out to you guys. For the agents that are, listening to this around the country, how would you, to me, it's very simple. Hi, investor in Atlanta. I'd like to find you some people that want to sell your homes. Are you okay with that? Is it any more complicated than that? Because you as the investor, you're looking for deals. You have nothing to lose. Me as the agent, if I call you and say, hey, dude, can we put something together? Are you going to have any objection with that?
Yeah, it's super straightforward and simple, just like you mentioned. One of the easiest, least amount of friction ways, if you get into any of the Facebook groups and you just put a post out there, I'm an agent, I'm finding off-market deals. These are often investment grade style projects. Who in the market's buying? You're going to get blown up. You're going to get plenty of buyers that raise their hand. What I would be in the business then is qualifying the ones that you know are going to perform. right? You want to work with an end buyer. You don't necessarily want to work with a wholesaler. You want to work with someone that's actually take on that project. You want to probably get a Rolodex of maybe a couple. There might be someone that has a specific niche where they just blow everyone out of the water as an investor. They can pay just way more money because their strategy and their underwriting is different. Well, that's good to know, you know. But then also go find your tried and true, your go-to. And that go-to investor, if they're any decent, will also help you grow your business because they're mutually incentivized. And so it's as simple as getting on Facebook and doing that way. The other ways you can do it, you can look on the MLS, go look at projects that you believe were renovated, go look at the tax records, see if there was a change in ownership in the last year or two, and then now reselling and it's renovated. Well, that's probably a fix and flipper.
Yeah.
Right.
Also, Kent Clother's company, Real Estate Worldwide, sells data. I think it's called Find Motivated Buyers or I forget what it's called, but if you reach out to them, where they sell you a list of anyone in your market that has done more than a handful cash purchases in the X period of time. If someone's bought 5 properties for cash in San Diego in the past year or 6 months, they're arguably going to want to work with you.
Yep. I'm actually going out to his mastermind tomorrow, so it'll be good. Going out there in
Ken
Phoenix.
is a beast. We're going to be attending those moving forward as well.
Nice.
Anybody have any questions for Erick before we wrap this up? And Erick, do you have any other final thoughts before we let you get back to taking down some deals?
Yeah. Some final closing thoughts is this is a long game. And if you change the lens to, you know, hey, I'm trying to make money this month to this is a long game that I'm going to be in it for 5, 10, 15 years. If you play the longer game, you'll realize that your strategies will also need to play in line with the long game. And one of the areas I see most agents completely flop on, and it just, everyone says it, they talk about it, but maybe something I communicated today will get through to somebody who's having this challenge, is when you play the long game, your follow-up is so incredibly important. You can spend all the money in the world generating these leads. You can spend all the time in the world drumming up new business, door knocking, calling, etc. But if you don't continue to build a relationship and continue to follow up and provide value for these prospective sellers and or buyers or investors, if you don't play the long game and continue to follow up, you won't receive the business and you will be out of the business if you don't do it. It is a core function. It is, I think, one of the main reasons that and just not being able to communicate effectively as to how to help somebody. But if you don't follow up, there's no point in doing everything else. So if you're going to sign up for this game and continue in this game, that needs to be a core focus for you. And I think it often is just completely missed. Some data to back it up. If you're calling someone, we've realized that the average sales cycle for someone just to authorize a contract, not to close out, authorize a contract, is somewhere between 90 and 105 days on average. And it's bimodal. Some people are quicker. Some people are 3 years on the line, but on average about 90 to 105 days. I think most agents probably give up after a week. Yeah. And that's their biggest problem. And so if you can fill that gap in your business too, maybe that was a nugget that you needed today, continue with that follow-up. You're not pestering people. You're there just to inquire about their situation, see if you can provide value as needed, and you are making that touch. You have to do that if you're going to do everything else we talked about today.
Nobody has lost business from following up too much.
That's
nobody.
Right.
I would even argue, and Erick pretty much just said it, you are leaving Lamborghinis on the table every year because you're not following enough, because you give up after 1 week or 1 year. I mean, you're just throwing away these Lamborghinis. And look, I'm not saying it's about the Lamborghini. It's a fun saying to say. You're giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars a year because you're not following up long enough. So question for Sarah is, what's the websites that you mentioned? I think you said Night, Property Radar.
Yep. Propertyradar.com is great. You can pull tons of different lists on there. It's not overly expensive. There's some exporting charges above and beyond 10,000 data points. That's a great website to pull a myriad of different types of data sets. Black Knight is a provider that you can look into. PropStream, another provider. Your title rep should also, if you say you're on a budget, go find a motivated title rep that's going to want all this business. They'll figure something else out. They have plenty of access to data. Yes. The list goes on. I think we use, I don't know, 15 different websites and sources. So start with those, do some due diligence. You'll figure out a way to find some data. If you're still looking for stuff, feel free to shoot me a message. I'm sure I'm happy to help point you in the right direction.
Love it. All right. So there's a few questions about getting this recording. So if you are using Suite Assist, all these recordings are put into the training section. If you're not in Suite Assist and you want access to all of these, you can go to and just register, and you'll get access to everything, and also join the Facebook group. They'll all be hosted. Go to let me make sure I give you the right one. collectivegroupcoaching.com, collectivegroupcoaching.com, and you'll have access to everything. Let me see if we have any more. You're getting a lot of compliments. And so just to type these out, it was property radar, black knight, as in a sold, like a knight in armor.
That's right.
Or
Knight in armor. Yep.
black N-I-G-H-T.
K-N-I-G-H-T.
K-N-I-H-T, yeah.
Yep.
And then prop stream.
Prop stream. There's top hap.
Top hap.
There's
title
plenty.
agent.
Your title, yeah, your title agent. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, dude, this was awesome. I knew it was going to be awesome. You're a legend. Thank you for sharing your time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Everyone, thank you for joining. We will see you next week. Same time, same place, every Tuesday. Appreciate you guys jumping on. Eric, thank you for letting us borrow an hour of your time. This was phenomenal. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much for having me. Good luck, everybody. See ya.
Bye-bye.